All right. Hello, YouTube. Say hi, YouTube, if you're in Twitch chat. Uh, my name is Joey. I'm from Microraptor Games, so we're a small little startup studio. I've been in the industry for a little over 10 years as a game designer, and I'm here reacting to Tim Cain. Do devs even know what gamers want? But Asmongold is also here with us too. This should be a little chaotic, so if you're watching and you're part of Asmon's fan base, just know I am a yapper. Okay, put me on in the background while you're playing a game, while you're playing hardcore WoW and running away from bosses. Do whatever you need to do. Okay, I'm just gonna sit here and we're gonna talk about game design. All right, let's jump into this.
Do devs know what gamers want?
Sometimes
Um,
devs like to think they know what gamers want, but if devs knew what gamers want, then they wouldn't be producing games such as Dragon Age: The Veilguard.
I think it depends on the devs.
Yeah, exactly. It does.
Yeah. Yeah, it really depends on the devs, huh?
Hi everyone, it's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
Today I want to talk about, do devs know what gamers want? This video is a direct follow-up to my video last week. Do gamers know what they like?
Yeah, and if you're wondering, we do have that on our YouTube channel, so you can watch that. It is, I think that one is over an hour long. Buckle in.
Before I made
Tim
that
the Tap
video,
Man. It's not.
I just mentioned I was going to do it in a comment section almost 2 months ago. And Lyre Noir said, personally, I think do devs know what gamers want is even a better question. And you know what? They're right. So both that
They're both
video,
good questions.
so I made that video and then I made this one pretty soon afterwards. Keep in mind, these were made back in November. Not even that late November, kind of mid-November.
It's kind of sad because it doesn't even need to be anything recent, because I feel like devs have been out of touch with what consumers want and what players want for a long time. And I think that also one thing that's worse than that is that they are oppositional to what players want. So it's not only that they don't know what they want, they do know what they want and they don't want to give it to them.
Well, they label it as, being, toxic gamers and whatever. If we want to go down that route, right, we could say there are certainly developers out there right now that are just attacking gamers for merely existing and wanting to play games. Although I do think that there is part of the fan base where, well, there is a legitimate criticism of certain things that are being pushed ideologically in games. I think that some of that, it's a spectrum. There are some of those players that I think are just tired of being pandered to, and I'm within that crowd 100%. But there are also others that I think are misappropriating the fight to places where it doesn't exist, where even the mere fact that there is a woman in a game might upset them. But I don't blame them for feeling as if they've been attacked for being gamers, because I do feel attacked for being a gamer. I have other developers who just will write the worst, stupidest stuff on Twitter attacking gamers for having some sort of feedback that doesn't align with their own political views, which they injected into their games in the first place. I don't know what they expect. I really don't. But I'm not sure if I agree that developers have been out of touch for a long time. I mean, it depends on how long you quantify that. It wasn't that long ago that we were getting Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect and things like that, where I feel as that was a pretty good golden era for AAA games. I mean, we just had Red Dead Redemption 2. I mean, what was that, 6 years ago? So, I mean, maybe if you want to say within the last half a decade, it's been starting to ramp up that way. I would agree. And I even think that it's more sinister because developers themselves are... Look, I'm a dev, right? So I've been to a lot of game developer conferences, and I feel like that some of these topics are being broached within the conferences that I go to. I mean, just last year I was at Digital Dragons, that was one here in Poland, probably the biggest developer conference here in Poland, and there are just talks about how to basically force your own ideologies into these games and, foregoing what gamers actually seem to desire, which is that They just want to play games where it feels like they're being pulled into a world where they can have this fantasy, and it doesn't feel like the developer is trying to, lecture them on some real world social issue at the same time. So it exists beyond just the business to customer standpoint. It exists in the business to business standpoint too, where developers themselves are pushing for these things. Big part might also be that when the project was started, like games coming out now started in the pandemic protest era. Yeah, there is that sort of like latency, right? Where you have that 3 year, 2 to 3 year period, longer for AAA games, where it's going to take time to catch up. A lot of places aren't just going to cancel their projects midway. But there's no way anybody can disagree that AAA developers, primarily them, are completely out of touch because they're not being run by gamers. They're not being run by people who care about games or care about you. They're being run by people who care about money.
So I don't know what the comments were on that other one, and I have no idea what the comments are going to be on this one.
Doesn't read
But I
the
think
comments.
it's better that way because I want to give you the
Yeah.
raw, unfiltered response to
Raw.
do devs know what gamers want? And here it is. No. No, we don't
We like to.
Okay.
know what you want.
If we knew what players wanted, we wouldn't have to do market research, right? We could just say, oh yes, players will want this game. And then successful game, we make millions of money, we party with babes on beaches, and it's all, history from there.
We have no idea,
Yeah.
seriously, what you want. I almost did this
There
as
it
a
is.
short. I was just going to do a short and go, do devs know what gamers want? Nope. And then cut it off.
That would have
the
been
end of it.
funny. That would have been great.
And you can stop here. If you want to know why it is we're so absolutely confused about what it is you want, keep watching. Because I know some of you are like,
Okay.
it's stupid. You should know what we want. We don't.
Okay.
Here's the longer answer. And it's all kind of can be summed up as because you don't know either. But you can,
Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about that too, where, you that was with the previous video, right? Where do gamers know what they want? And mainly it's that generally, yes, we equated it to food, right? Where you generally know what food that you like. But that doesn't mean that every restaurant you go to is going to serve it exactly the way you like, use the same herbs and spices. I mentioned I like chicken tenders. I've been to places that serve those chicken tenders raw, okay? That's why I always break open my chicken tenders before I eat them so that I don't die of salmonella. I think players generally know what they like, but they might try a new food, they might break into that new genre and learn that they don't like that, or might learn that they should have been playing those games much sooner. So I do think by and large gamers do know what they want, but that doesn't mean that developers are providing it in the same way that they like or in the right way that they like. It all depends.
got to remember I'm saying the collective view. I wish English had the collective view.
Pineapple pizza.
Southern English does. Y'all don't know what you want. Let me
True,
dive into
brother.
that. This is a deep dive on why y'all don't even know what you want, which is why we don't know what to give you.
Yep.
First off,
Yeah, I agree.
many of you only tell
I think that he's right, but I also think that he's half right. People might not know what they want, but they do know what they don't want.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the focuses of that video, right? Was that the negativity surrounding games is a lot more prevalent than the positivity, so it's easier to determine what players aren't liking in games. And that is primarily what we use to develop games, right? Is, let's say developer A, Annie the developer, or Bartek, if we want to go with the, good old Polish names, plays a game. And he's like, okay, I thought this was going to be a bit better in this regard, but it wasn't. I don't like how arcadey the racing is here. I want it more realistic. So because he has a negative experience, he wants to make a game that solves that problem. It's a negative experience that we turn around and be into a positive one. Our own game, Colden Chronicles, it's like, I like alchemy games. I like making potions. It's kind of fun. But none of the alchemy games that exist really allow me to get into that role-playing experience and make choices that matter. Hence our own game, #ad. Um, so it's like that, it's like gamers do, I think, generally know what they want, but because it's constantly changing, it's like okay, I'm tired of this now. Now developers need to adapt to what people are tired of. At one point, making games like Minecraft was popular. Now making a game like Minecraft is incredibly cringe. Those games fell out of popularity. They might come back at some point. There might be a resurgence. I think to some extent, strategy games are having a bit of a resurgence, especially turn-based. But all of these go through phases, and developers need to adapt. And if you adapt too late, you run the risk of creating a game that missed its time and missed its point. So, there's always, I think a lot of development is reactionary. We find things we don't like, we find niches that haven't been tapped, or we find niches that are becoming popular. I think Power World might be one where you are going to see more games similar to that if Nintendo doesn't sue them coming into popularity, and then it'll eventually go back down and there will be something else that takes its place.
Developers, what you hate. Great. You said what it is you don't want, but what is it you want? I have an entire video on how to give good feedback, and I'll link it below.
I don't think it's the player's responsibility to tell developers what they want necessarily. I mean, when you're a gamer, you're just consuming it. You're the customer, right? You are walking up into a sea of games that exist on Steam, right? We go over it all the time. The number of games releasing on Steam in the next 7 days is probably nearly or over 100. You have a buffet in front of you. And that's scary to developers and publishers especially, because at any point you can just walk away from the food that they're offering that cost $400 million to make, Concord, and you can go to the game that cost $100 to make, something like Vampire Survivors, something much cheaper that is going to give you much better replay value and probably has outsold in terms of money something like Dragon Age Veilguard. And I mean, honestly, everything is outsold Concord at this point. So you have, gamers have this buffet. They can go anywhere. They don't need to dictate to developers what they want. That's up to developers to determine exactly why. Any game designer will tell you one of the most important aspects of our job is to stay on top of current market trends. I mean, that's within probably 90% of game design job descriptions that I've seen on the internet. You must be up to date with market trends. It seems like an obvious thing. A lot of places don't even include it because it's just so obvious. You need to know what gamers are playing, what they're liking and not liking. I will spend a majority of my time on YouTube, on Twitch, just watching gameplay to see how I watch Asmon play, so I can see how you guys in chat react to certain scenarios in games. So that I can see, okay, players reacted this way to this thing. They liked this thing because it was funny, and I can use that as a basis of determining what players are going to, find enjoyable in the games that I design too. I think it's easy as dev. You want to make a game because you want to make a game, or because you want money. If you want to make a game, you know what type of game to make. I think that you're always trend chasing in this day and age. The algorithms of Steam it's so competitive that if you do not have an existing presence coming to Steam, you likely will never gain one. And even if you have an existing presence, you can have a bad launch, and a game that is mostly positive versus a game that is mixed is treated much differently by the algorithm behind the scenes. Reviews matter, wish lists matter, views matter. It can matter even before you get to Steam in terms of funding. If you don't have enough wish lists, you're not going to get a very good deal from a publisher, in which case you might have already screwed yourself over. Why there's a lot of simulator games. It is a market that is still pretty popular, though losing a little bit, because it's kind of overdone at this point. But it works. You can constantly just keep feeding a new simulator game to people who play simulators. I mean, but niches exist. That's exactly why they exist. You don't necessarily need to chase a trend in order to make money. You definitely need to chase a trend, or you need to have some sort of IP in order to have a high enough return on investment if your initial budget is high enough. That's the exact reason why AAA games feel so bland and soulless, is because the only two ways that you can make a good enough return on investment with a budget of 300, 400 million is increasing the cost of the game and or widening its appeal. So getting rid of all the things that will narrow the appeal. And yeah, that's why I just want games to cost less money so that we don't have to widen the appeal so much and we can start having risk back in game development.
Low. But I can just say, when you keep saying, I hate this in games, I hate this feature, I
Yeah.
hate these kind of characters and all that, great. What kind of characters do you want? If you hate sarcastic characters, well, guess what? There's an entire realm of non-sarcastic characters. But what is it you want? Do you want funny characters? Do you want serious characters?
I think that a lot of people like everybody wants something different, right? And that's
Yeah.
always the issue is that like how do you please everybody? I think that people want characters that seem authentic. And they want characters that behave in ways that seem realistic, but at the same time they don't seem like they're a facsimile of the personalities of the people that are making the game.
I get what Asmon's saying. I agree and kind of disagree. So I think what he's saying is that that people, of course, don't want characters that feel one note and is as if it's just a reskin of the writer. I agree. I don't think players are upset with characters that feel necessarily, unrealistic, because it depends on the universe. It really just depends on what you're trying to make. Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that.
Do you want characters with a lot of background? Do you characters that with very little, that you don't want to spend a wall of a time in a wall of text dialogue? What do you want?
I think let me put it this way. It's not that if you see players hating a sarcastic character, like let's say, or like an annoying character like Claptrap, okay? But it's not that people had an issue necessarily with Claptrap in Borderlands 1. It's just that it got tiresome. And they kind of leaned too heavily into it. They realized people found it funny, the juxtaposition between Claptrap's personality and the rest of this Mad Max style world, at least for the first Borderlands. It was an issue that they kind of doubled down on that style of writing for Borderlands 2. And don't get me wrong, Borderlands 2 I enjoy, but it doesn't age super well because of some of its writing. And then they went even further. Pre-sequel was even worse. And then Borderlands 3 was even worse. And it just got tiresome. And it's like, this was supposed to be a Mad Max inspired world, and now it feels as if it's just Overwatch with cell shading and unlikable main villains. People laughed at this joke, quick, keep telling it. That's exactly it, Nixie. Yeah, so it's the fact that you chase what worked. So in Borderlands 1, Claptrap worked. So let's double down on that and do more of it for Borderlands 2. And it's like you're losing it. You're losing it.
That's why you have to tell us what you want and not what you don't want. But wait, there's more. Even when you say,
I think in a lot of those cases, it's not an example of like people want one thing or another. Like you can have Elden Ring that's massively successful, and you can also have something like God of War that's massively successful. You don't really need to have like one specific version of it. I think anything like that could fit together. Yeah, Baldur's Gate 3 characters, exactly. And so like if you go to the grocery store, you're going to get steak and ice cream. Usually if you want steak, you're not going to supplement that for ice cream or vice versa.
Hopefully.
But you get both of them because sometimes you like both of them at the same time.
Okay, I won't question that one. But what I will say is that... What was I trying to say? I completely forgot. Something about... I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was. The steak and ice cream thing kind of threw me off. I think it was that... I think players want to feel a little bit of surprise here, where rather than go up and dictate to developers, we want... Here's the game that we want you to design. Exactly, here are the characters we want in it. I just think that's kind of unreasonable. I mean, I get what Tim's saying, though. Tim's not saying that he wants that literally. He just wants there to be less negativity, because this kind of ties into the previous video. So if you're only watching this one, I do recommend watching the Do Gamers Know What They Want. It would just be nice to have some affirmation, whereas most of it is the opposite of that, where it's just, oh, you didn't like us including this, so we'll take that thing out. Those wouldn't listen even if we told them. It depends. It's just, are we talking about AAA developers, or publishers who have never played a game in their life? Or are we talking about, super giant games working on Hades, who, these people have been around for decades. They clearly love games. They clearly know what they're doing. Basically saying games are like wives, always just expecting you to know what they want you to do. Exactly.
Say what you want. You're often extraordinarily
Sorry.
vague.
Yeah.
You will say, I want a better game. I want better AI. I want a better UI. Yeah, I'll just slide the better slider from
I'll click the check mark to add multiplayer. That's all it was, guys.
okay to great on all of those. I have an entire video on.
I remember when he said that, it just reminded me of my old guild leader whenever we were doing Sarthurian, Three Drakes, and Wrath. He says, okay, everybody, open up your menu, go to configuration, go to interface, and I want you to find the button that says shit at the game and make sure that it's unchecked.
That's perfect.
And it was just out of fucking nowhere.
Why developers need context to your feedback.
Yeah.
That's never more truer than when you give feedback. When you give, especially positive feedback. If you don't say what you're talking about, it can be really vague. For example, what does better for you mean in a game? Or when you say, how is that AI bad? What are you talking about? What are they not taking cover? Are they just running straight at you shooting? What do you mean?
Yeah, it's just the issue that, sometimes on the systems that seem like they're the easiest, especially with AI, because it's all something that you see as the reactions of the NPCs running around the world, but behind the scenes, it is a very complex, puzzle of not only the behavior, but also the data that you're feeding to it. I mean, you can even go back and look at a game like The Last of Us 1, right? Which at the time that they released the gameplay trailer, the AI, especially running on a PS3, was quite advanced. But the amount of data that they have to feed to those NPCs at any given point is quite extensive. And those things have to work together. So the better that you can pinpoint, especially if you say, oh, I fix the crash bugs. Well, where is it crashing? What were you doing? You have to provide that context so that we can nail down. Otherwise, our QA team is just going to be running in circles trying to find a crash that they don't know where or how it existed. The context is important.
When you say you don't like a UI, what is the friction point in that UI that you're encountering? What is it that's bothering you?
I think that Jeff Kaplan said it best, where he said that you can't rely on players to give you a solution, but you can sure as hell rely on them to tell you when there's a problem.
100%. And it's just the same, again, if we go back to the food analogy, when you go to a restaurant, you're paying for somebody else to prepare food, oftentimes food that you don't have the time or skill or resources to prepare yourself. You're trusting, that's why you're the customer. You're expecting them to do what you're paying them to do. And when you pay 60, potentially 80, or if Ubisoft has anything to say about it, $90 for a game, you're expecting them to provide you with what you paid for, which is a well-designed game that plays well, is complete, and provides you with the experience that they promised you. And it seems like you can't even get that nowadays with AAA developers for this massive, price per unit that they're asking. I agree with the context, or the need for context when providing feedback, right? Especially if there's like a bug. Tell us exactly where it is. You don't necessarily need to know how to phrase it in a way that developers understand. We just need to be able to pinpoint where is the issue and what's the general issue. If you just said, this mini game seems kind of tedious, I think that any designer who knows what they're doing can go and look in and kind of step back from the loop they've created in this mini game and say, oh yeah, okay, we're asking you to complete it 200 times, but it was boring after the 100th time, so either let's add some more variation to this mini game so that it can survive that 200 iteration life cycle, or let's just make you not have to do it 200 times to complete it, but only 100 times to get the rewards that you're trying to get to. And that comes down a lot of times to balance, right? That if it's not always that if something is grindy, that it's bad. It's just that you got bored with it after the first 50 iterations, but we're asking you to do twice as many, and that therefore we need to rebalance either how fast the rewards are doled out, or like I said, add more variation to it. So just, the context is important, even saying that it's boring or just elaborating on that. And I think that maybe some of the reason that developers have a hard time getting there is because they aren't interacting with their player bases directly, where they are being fed information either through ticket systems or through a community manager, or through a team of community managers, and not being able to then ask for that context directly from the player, I think is one of the biggest hindrances of especially AAA development, where you might have those companies that say, okay, you're working for us, now you can't interact on our forums or something. And it's really stupid. It is I think it's one of the worst things that ever happened to development, was decoupling the developers from the gamers. And I'll give you one quick example before I press play on this. I'm sorry, I do yap. Back when oh god, what's the company? Monkey Island. Lucasfilms. LucasArts Games, whatever it was. Back when those sorts of games were being released, thank you, Base Cowboy, for the follow. You used to be able to like call a number for support, and it wasn't like some AI agent. It wasn't some customer support agent. It was a like programmer that answered the phone and would help you get through like a puzzle or a level. You could just call up a developer on the phone and get information and a hint of how to solve a puzzle. I feel like that's missing nowadays. And if you're ever in like a Discord with developers who do respond, just know that that is a rarity. I hope it becomes more common, but just be nice to them. They do probably receive a lot of a big influx and volume of this, sometimes the negativity. They are still human. Just try to be nice, but as a dev, please don't call me. I mean, that's why we have a Discord, right? I have a time and a place for that. Would probably not get any real work done. Yeah, how are you doing, man? Oh yeah, you're having a problem with the puzzle? Did you watch the game last night?
And I think that's always the issue that a lot of game devs have, is that they have to effectively translate this sucks into like actionable behavior.
I say
Yes.
that UI is dumb. It's not helping. And trust me, it's not just gamers who do this. I've worked with people who've literally said that out of their mouth. They're like, that looks dumb. Great, I'll get right on that. Sometimes though, and I've talked about how some UI issues are really an underlying system mechanic issue. This comes up in the videos on encumbrance, where you can have a really good UI if your game supports encumbrance, but you take encumbrance out and suddenly that same UI is terrible because people can carry more. And suddenly there's a lot more things in their inventory. And the UI you were using for a limited inventory doesn't work for a UI with an unlimited inventory.
Well, think of it this way too, where UI problems can definitely can stem from further problems, like you said, with the system. So imagine you're making a UI, you have tons of buttons, tons of information that you can put on a HUD or UI, and in a lot of cases you do that because it is the lowest cost solution to resolve a problem. But there's a balance between overuse of UI and underuse of UI, where I'll give an example, because I think that in like our game that we're developing right now, you have to press through like 3 different menus to be able to provide a potion to an NPC. Right? We're still prototyping the game, right? So it's not like it's final. That's too many. Like, it's just too many. And it's being done because that's the best way to flow the logic. But it's also a pain point. It's a friction point for dealing with the NPCs, where it's just too much information shoved at you when all you're trying to do is give a potion to an NPC. So we need to rethink that. And it's not very immersive either. UI in most cases is not very immersive. It's not diegetic, and developing that can be quite a hindrance. So sometimes, UI can be the problem from a player's perspective, but really it's a result of a system that doesn't provide a way for the player to accomplish things in fewer clicks or through fewer menus. Even a little bit of context helps, right? Where you say this level was just not fun. Well, it's like, well, we have 4 different encounters that we spawn in this level and 3 different difficulties, so you need to provide us some information. It's like, was it a certain difficulty was the problem? Was it one room? We just played Stalker 2, and there was one room near the end of the game that felt like just this massive leap in difficulty over the rest of the game. And, when if I were to provide feedback on that room to GSC, I want to state exactly what I didn't like about that room, how I feel it could have been improved. But I'm also a game designer, and I can kind of think things through from a developer's perspective. Whereas I don't blame a gamer if they just can't verbalize why they don't like something. That's not their job necessarily to go into detail, but try to provide as much detail as you can, because then we can look at a much smaller bit of the game or the experience and focus on working on that, right? I don't know if this is a hot take, but to me, working on my project is not about what other gamers want, it's what I want. I know that companies focus more on making money. Well, yeah, because, for you as a developer, making money off of that game may be secondary to making the game itself. But for, any big studio, they do need to have that return on investment, and there does need to be that balance between the game's vision and the game director's vision and what the target audience is expecting from that game, right? Or what the market expectations have already set. Again, that's why one of the biggest dangers is mismarketing your game. You shouldn't show cinematic trailers or make big claims if you cannot provide the experience that is equivalent to those claims and experiences that you've already set. Balance is the key word. It's the key word in everything. I mean, we talk about it a lot when it comes to game design. It just depends. It depends on so many different factors. And even when, Tim here or Asmon is talking about, market trends and changes, and you might be targeting one aspect of the strategy market. You might be targeting real-time strategy games. Well, what are you competing with? What are games that just came out that have set new expectations? Baldur's Gate 3 has now, I think, set people's expectations for production value of CRPGs a bit higher than it was before. I don't know the amount, but if you were asking me, hey, we want you to work on a new CRPG as the game director, I would say, you know what, we need to try to get closer to the production value of Baldur's Gate 3, because now many of the players that might be interested in our game are going to see that and make their purchase decision out of that. But that does come with an increased cost of the budget and, again, wider appeal and or increased price of the game itself. It's a whole art form to even design a game properly, and it is one hell of an art form to market and then release that game properly. And it's a miracle that any games are actually successful with that. That's just why devs are kind of fighting in the dark here, because there are so many variables that can change the way a game is perceived.
This is what I was saying before about how, like, some game devs and people that are really, like, this guy made Fallout, right? Like, there's some guys and, like, people, right, women too, that understand, like, these second order effects of, like, changes and, like, mechanics in video games. And that's why they make video games that go on to sell, like, millions of copies for, decades. And this is the same type of insight that people that, like, made classic WoW or, like, Baldur's Gate 3 or, Elden Ring.
Yes,
That they're all the same. This is a smart way to look at it.
Tim is not a developer that
So
shoots
that's why
blindly
you
in
need
the
to
dark.
be very specific about what it is you didn't like. Do you really hate that UI, or do you hate that you can vacuum up everything, and or do you want to be able to vacuum up everything, but you just wish the game would somehow organize it better?
I mean, sometimes too, that, dislike of like UI or systems can stem from the fact that you didn't teach the player how to use it properly, right? Sometimes for us, every gamer is different, and every game experience is different. Sometimes I will play games when I just want to relax, and if I load up a game that is expecting me to learn new things, it's like it's just too much. But there might be, tomorrow might be a different day, and I might be willing to do that. So sometimes a player can just get on at the wrong time, or a developer can forget that they need to teach the player how to use this system properly. And even tutorials can sometimes be cumbersome. So there's tons of little things that can contribute to negative feeling about a game. We were talking a bit about it in one of the previous videos where, well, what am I trying to say here? Sometimes players can just go through, skip a tutorial, jump into the game, and be frustrated that they don't understand how to use the game. But you need to meet developers halfway. But sometimes meeting developers halfway is a slog. It is horrible to have to go through too long of a tutorial just to figure out how to use a system. I don't know, man. It's one of those things where there's no perfect solution, and every genre is different. I think that if Crusader Kings 4 came out, I think that the expectations for how in-depth a tutorial should be and how much UI should be on the screen is far, far different from when the next Call of Ass comes out, and you're expecting to go fight aliens or whatever they're fighting at this point. Very different games.
Be specific. Here's the one that really gets me, and that many of you refuse to acknowledge.
Okay.
You all.
Here's the hot take.
Again, so this is us. We are the ones who are wrong.
Just had a plural you. You all do not agree on what a good feature is.
It's because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It really is. Here's the good metric that you can use. Generally speaking, a game that is reviewed positively on Steam, regardless of the number of reviews, and you can disagree with me on this, but generally speaking, that is a well-designed game. Because the people that it was marketing to, the people that it was calling to, that had the desire and the willingness to purchase that game, played it and enjoyed it. Now, it doesn't mean it's a perfect game. It doesn't mean it's a bad game. Those are subjective. But that's generally a good way that you can tell as a designer, was the game designed well? That doesn't mean that the game is going to be financially successful. That is a separate matter, because not all games that are designed well sell well, and not all games that sell well are designed well. But if we're specifically speaking about whether or not a game was designed well, review score on Steam is probably one of the best metrics as a whole. And everybody's individual review is their own individual opinion, subjective, of whether or not they like the game.
Go back and watch both of my encumbrance videos. They're linked below. Or watch the video I had on fast travel, or even the video I did on providing game difficulty, different options in there. Read the comments on it, which I know...
That's true. By the way, the correct answers are... encumbrance is bad if it makes you spend more time managing inventory than playing the game. Game difficulty modes are bad, and they should be enabled through different types of gameplay, like things like Havel's Armor and Dark Souls 1. And I forgot the other one that he mentioned, but yeah, those are the correct answers and the right opinions to have.
So the right opinion. Okay, he's just being facetious about the right opinions part, but I mean, I can agree that, yes, encumbrance, if you're spending more time in menus than gameplay, you probably have a problem, right? So when you're designing a game, you often think of gameplay percentages. And dealing with menus, especially in an RPG game, is one of those things that you might want to consider as a part of a gameplay percentage. So if you have a game like Skyrim, because we all know Skyrim, we can all probably visualize it, you need to ask yourself as a designer, how much time is the average player spending in menus? So like, alchemy, enchanting, inventory management, equipping, drinking potions, whatever. And if that percentage that you desire, let's say, is probably around, probably 5% of the gameplay, right? I would say 5% is a pretty fair expectation for players in Skyrim. But you see that players are spending 15% of that time in menus. You need to analyze exactly where they're spending most of that time And you might have an outlier, right? Where it's like, okay, they're spending way too much time in alchemy. Why is that? Well, they're looking around for the ingredients that they need to mix. Okay, so we maybe need a better sorting system or filtering system to figure out exactly what ingredients the player is looking for, right? And that can trim down on some of the frustrations of the alchemy system, but also contribute to the overall metric of gameplay percentages. As it goes with game difficulties, I disagree with Asmon on this because while, yes, it's interesting that difficulty is more dynamic, some players like when it's right in their face what difficulty options are going to do, because then that sets expectations for the rest of the run. And if they find unwanted challenges while playing the game that they can't then modify, that is a pain point. So again, it just depends, right? Because you could also say that, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, From Software games without difficulty is beautifully designed. I would agree. But it's because players know that the game is all mechanical, that they can avoid all damage by just not getting hit, right? Get good. So, the game sets the expectations that throughout the game, every single time you take damage, that is an opportunity that you can learn and eventually in the future overcome. That the game isn't going to randomly throw something at you that will break that rule. No, you can avoid that damage if you know what you're doing. So it really just depends on what you've already dictated and communicated to the player that they can expect with the game. And again, with From Software games, there is that dictation, that communication, that it's all mechanical and you can avoid all the damage if you know what you're doing.
Oh, fast travel. Fast travel is sometimes good and sometimes bad. It's usually good, but sometimes bad.
Everything
Wrong
is
difficulties are
everything
great.
just
No,
depends.
they're not. They're bad. That's the wrong opinion.
A lot of you don't do, and you complain
Just
that
fucking
YouTube
around.
doesn't do a good job
Yeah,
of sorting
that's
them.
just
Just
not
pick
the right
one of
way to
those
look at it.
videos, set it to
not
show
true.
all the comments, and scroll for a few minutes. You will find that some of you literally say you will not play a game that is lacking a particular feature
While you play that game.
and then keep scrolling, and you'll find people who hate games
Yeah.
that have that feature.
Oh, yeah, that
And
too.
it can be anything: fast travel, VO, walls of text.
Yeah.
Well, we mentioned this in the last video, right? About do gamers know what they want? Because this is all kind of some overlap here. It's not that they don't like these features, they don't like these features being handled in the way that they're being handled, right? So if you think of quest markers is a big one where people are like, I hate quest markers. It's not that they hate quest markers, it's that they hate how hand-holdy it feels to be shown exactly where to go and are not given any real opportunity or ability to problem solve on their own with enough in-game contextual clues and information to solve that puzzle of where to go and how to handle a situation on their own. They've been robbed of the discovery, right? So let's go back to Elden Ring for a second and we can talk about exploration versus discovery. One of the things that I think it's maybe doesn't sound, maybe it isn't clear on the outset. So, exploration is an action that you do. It's running around an area. In an open world, it's running around and just looking at things. Discovery is when you have actually made a discovery at a point that you look at, and you are rewarded for that with the dopamine of either finding a new enemy to fight, a new item to collect, maybe a bit of both, a new NPC to talk to, a new quest, whatever. That's discovery. And when you rob the player of that discovery by showing them like a something on the minimap, right, like a question mark. Well, now it's no mystery that there's something there. I know there's something there, and sometimes it might even tell me what's there. It's an undiscovered monster nest. Wow, great. I'm so glad to see this ruin in the distance and know exactly what I'm up against. So the exploration is a tool that should be used to feed that discovery to the player, and Elden Ring is a fantastic example. When you load into Elden Ring, you have no idea where anything or what anything is. You can see the ruins or a castle in the distance. You don't know what's there. you can have a pretty good idea that there's going to be a boss there, right? It's a From Software game. You don't know anything about the boss. You don't know anything about the loot. You don't know anything about the secrets, about the hidden passages. That is all the beauty of discovering Elden Ring, is like, oh, I can jump down onto this roof. And then I go around the roof and it's like, oh, there's an item here. Discovery. Boom. That's what players want. So in a game where you can just disable map markers, for quest objectives, it's not like that solves the problem, right? Because otherwise players would be happy that they could just turn off quest markers. Oh, I didn't like quest markers. They're gone. Beautiful. I'm all happy now. No, it's that now the game doesn't provide enough context clues by saying, the circle of ruin is around the Andor Mountains and up the path of no return. And then you can go in the world and you can see, okay, yep, that's the mountain he was saying, and I see the start of the path, and I can go there. That's where you've provided enough context clues where the player can now make that discovery on their own. And it's so much more rewarding that way. Rant over. Quest markers are baked into design since narration and level design were reduced. I think they've just become so standard. It's one of those things where I talk about so often that I think I mentioned on Twitter, right, Lazy Fangs? I think you saw that, where I was talking about yellow paint. I know we're getting so off topic. Like I said, I yap. The reason why yellow paint is so dangerous to me as a designer is you're now setting an expectation that all games have to use yellow paint because players are so used to it at this point that if they don't have it, and yes, the metrics are true that players without yellow paint struggle more. The solution to that shouldn't be use more yellow paint. It should be stop using yellow paint. Stop. If your kid has the training wheels taken off of their bicycle and falls over, the solution shouldn't be put the training wheels back on. It should be get the fuck up, you stupid kid, and keep trying. I mean, you think that, but you say it in a nice way. You help them, right? You teach them, okay, you made this mistake. You lean too hard this way, right? So guide them, guide the player using those natural cues of just place a light source over a door. Put some, have an enemy come out of a door and now the door is open. And now you're like, okay, where did those enemies come from? Guide the player naturally through interesting tricks that enables them to think critically and stop at the moment of any friction during playtests just putting yellow paint somewhere. Stop capitulating and just let the player get frustrated. Because I promise you, if they get frustrated and quit your game because they couldn't just sit and think for 2 seconds, fine, go play Hello Kitty Island Adventure. This game probably isn't for you. Or think about it for a second. You have 3 doors. The enemies came out of one of them. Your goal is to go destroy the enemy base. Where might you want to go in order to find more enemies? Maybe it's the door where all the enemies came out of. Don't put yellow paint around the door frame as if some minion from Despicable Me has ejaculated all over it, okay? I'm tired of seeing it. More importantly, make memorable locations. Way too many places fall out of mind quickly. Yes. Yeah, do like landmark-based level design. Just make a level memorable. Example, combat difficulty, puzzle difficulty, and parkour difficulty. Oh, option we should allow players to choose if they want it or not. That's better than nothing. And for Dragon Age Failguard, for all of its faults, I at least appreciated that I could turn off yellow paint. And I only had like 1 or 2 places where I was a little confused, and then I was over it.
Story mode. Some of you require it, and some of you skip games that have it. And you have reasons for doing it. I'm not saying you're wrong.
I think that really the issue, too, is like he's bringing up a lot of good points, is that you can't make everybody happy.
Yes.
This is one of the big issues that I think AAA development has, is that they have development budgets that are so big that they strive to make everyone happy because they need to have a target audience that's that big in order to like theoretically generate a profit. And because of that, that's why they end up making flaccid, boring games. It's because they try to just give everybody everything and then also implement everything that everybody wants. And it's just a bad game ultimately.
Yeah, it is. So
I think
it feels targetless. It feels like I don't know what it's trying to say because it at no point is saying anything that is going to repulse even one gamer. It's exactly what I felt with Veilguard. It was the most it was the most controversially lacking game that I've ever played. Finding Nemo had more blood and violence than Veilguard. Characters were more mean in Finding Nemo than I could ever be in Veilguard.
That's what ends up happening. Is that you have them that they're listening to everything, and there's no way that you can solve that problem.
What I am saying is there's no possible way to make a game that will make all of you happy.
Yeah, exactly. He's right.
What's interesting to me,
well, this shouldn't be a
and
goal
this channel
either.
has made me really acknowledge it, you don't even agree on the fact that all of you are disagreeing. Some of you don't acknowledge there are any other game players out there. There
Sounds
was
about right.
a video I did where I said...
well, I was the same way. Like, when I found out... So, like, I remember whenever I was a kid, I assumed that girls didn't really play video games because they're just not good at video games. And, I mean, when you're 11 years old, I feel like that's a pretty default
a typical
opinion,
young
right?
boy opinion, yeah.
And, like, the ones that did play video games were bad. And so, like, when I saw how popular like Animal Crossing was and Pokemon was with girls, I remember there was this one girl in high school that played Pokemon, and I thought she was a Pokemon. I was like, holy fuck, I didn't even know this was real. I was shocked.
Yeah, people... I mean... but the difference is the important metric, I think, when it comes to male and female gamers is that they're playing different platforms and they're playing different genres. And that's one of those things that as a game designer, you need to consider when you're developing a game. I guys hear like a weird sound in the left side of your ear, or is that just me? Am I going deaf?
Frequently want better graphics, but a lot of you ask for better graphics, and someone said, shiny, and I quote, no one asked for better graphics. I guess you never read a review and you don't go on any forum boards, because yes, they do.
Yes, look, this is the hot take that I know a lot of gamers are going to disagree with. Asking for better graphics is great, but just so you know, graphics and crazy sorts of art and unique assets is one of the largest reasons why game budgets are rising. And if you are okay with that, just know that most places are going to have to make those considerations to reduce risk because the budget is increasing. They're going to have to increase price or they're going to have to increase market appeal. That's simple. So I'm not saying that you can't ask for this because I think at some point graphics are going to hit a plateau. I think we're already quite far into that plateau where we can't really pull anything more out of graphical capabilities to achieve really realistic, in the moment, real-time rendering. We're hitting that point. Seems like a vocal minority. You say that, and I think a lot of the people, I think there is an overlap between players who say they prefer gameplay and story over graphics, but will then comment on videos of trailers, gameplay trailers, and say, this looks like a PS2 game. I promise you that overlap does exist. I don't know how big it is, but it does exist, and it is toxic to the development scene. I'm not saying you can't ask for games that look good, but just know, go play Elden Ring. I promise there's a lot of... and let me defend you to an extent. Let me defend gamers to an extent here. I think that if a game is good enough, players are willing to overlook certain graphical, lackluster areas. Elden Ring doesn't have the greatest water effects, but they're serviceable. A lot of the particle effects, there's a lot of clipping of things in Elden Ring, but players don't care because these are kind of cosmetic and they're not large enough to pull you out of the immersion. And I think that a lot of Western developers put too much time and effort focusing on preventing these things from occurring when they aren't that important. So I think that Asian studios, Japanese studios do a better job at deciding exactly where to put their priorities when it comes to art. Western developers don't do it as well, but also expectations from the market do influence that art necessity and that budget. That would be wonderful. You love the PS2. In some cases, it's even a selling point creating a boomer shooter. Yes, it is. But just so you know, like achieving that perfect photorealistic, everything is, 4K, beautiful texture, all of the, you have volumetric clouds, volumetric fog, volumetric FX here, 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 and here. It just not only increases the budget, but increases time needed to optimize, which increases budget. It increases the amount of technology needed to render it, which will increase your budget because as a player, you have to get better hardware. It really will just keep spiraling out of control if we keep pushing it further and further and further. And if you want games to cost less and to be more focused on gameplay, you will have to just say, yeah, I don't care if the effects are shit. I don't care if there's ray tracing. And I promise you, if you start asking for less of that, you will start to see more risky games, and games won't be increasing in price as much. Maybe we should go back and explore the tech behind the shrinking horse balls. I mean, Rockstar was onto something, and Rockstar gets a pass because they're Rockstar. They have that GTA money. They can do whatever the hell they want. They can spend as much as they want. They will sell those copies. Most places don't have the expertise, the budgets, the engine that Rockstar has. It's just you can't all meet that same level of realism.
And keep in mind, better graphics. Sometimes they're just talking about they want a higher resolution. They bought a 4K monitor and they're upset they're not getting a game in 4K. Sometimes they want a farther view distance. They're upset that it clips really early, or that there's always things blocking their view. They don't get a nice wide view of anything. Sometimes they just mean more creature variety or more location variety. These are all better graphics. These are all things that require a lot more art time, a lot more things to be loaded in, a lot better optimization of your engine. These are all going into the category of better graphics. And all of you, I guarantee, have asked for some form of better graphics at some point when you're responding to a question of what did you like and dislike about this.
One small thing too to consider, by the way, when you ask for like more diverse scenes in a game, is that really chews through VRAM budget like heavily. So if I place down 1,000 of the same tree in a scene in an engine, I'm only loading that texture into VRAM once. But if I have 1,000 different trees, that is 1,000 different textures, and that's only assuming that there is just one, the color texture, right? The diffuse. You might also then have the normal map, the specular map, any other sort of maps to that, like some tessellation info, whatever. All of those are different textures that have to be loaded, and all of those are pretty big. You have like a 15 megabyte or 30 megabyte 4K texture here, another one for its normal map, another one for its ambient occlusion map, and another one for its specular, right? These are all different things, and that all adds up. Again, one item in a scene might have 5 or 6 or even up to 8 different textures loaded into the VRAM at any point. And if you ask for more things into that scene, you're starting to increase the VRAM usage very heavily. So that's one of the reasons why you'll see developers reuse assets or, make different, make a whole bunch of different trees that all reuse the same kind of material or texture. Just use AI to play fake games. Yeah, it's just everything has a cost. Everything has a cost. And sometimes things that don't seem like they should have as much of a cost, like different enemy variety, can have a pretty big cost, especially if those games need to target different platforms like consoles, right? Where you have that limited VRAM.
I think also like that's definitely true, and a lot of people
keep in
don't
mind
know,
too. Sometimes you guys talk about art style.
Yeah, it's art style really. It's art style and like shading and colors, and that's really what people are thinking about when they say graphics. I think a lot of people distill graphics down to just meaning fidelity. And I feel like that's only one small piece of the pie.
Yes.
But everything I just mentioned, even if the art style stays the same, you will need more polys and more textures and more everything just to give you more creature variety or more location variety. So just that means falls under the aegis of better graphics, but means more work, more artists, more time, more money.
Yep.
And many of you say, well, I don't really care about graphics. I'm one of you. Graphics have never been high on my list of what I care about in a game. But many, many, many players are attracted to a game by its pretty graphics.
Yep.
Even if they stay afterwards because the gameplay is so good.
And do you want to know one of the reasons why that is? It's the reason why that's still a problem is because publishers also buy with their eyes, because they don't always understand exactly how to get from point A to point B. They understand better than players to some extent, but because players keep wanting it, publishers keep wanting it, because they know if they show shiny new cinematic trailer at certain conferences, that it will get a lot of views, right? Because shiny new cinematic trailers sell. They still do. I think it's becoming less common, but it is still very common that these are at the forefront of what developers and studios show off first. Look at the new what's that new vampire game that was announced a couple days ago from Rebel Wolves? I forget the name of it. Have we all collectively forgotten it? Dawn, something Dawn. Okay, we all forgot it. Dawn Walker. Yeah, Daywalker, the game. So yeah, Dawn Walker just got announced. Cinematic trailer, no gameplay. No gameplay. And if anything that looked like gameplay, probably just mocked up. Look at Witcher 4. Cinematic trailer. Meant nothing. We just looked at this game Exodus earlier. Cinematic trailer. So these trailers still do sell, and it's because they're a very high fidelity way to sell an idea, which can then gauge how much of your audience you've enamored and how large it probably is, right? Because you can use those metrics to comparative to others to see how many. Okay, we got 1 million views on the cinematic trailer. This trailer from another studio, similar game, competing product probably, got 1 million views, and they sold this many copies. And we can start to narrow down exactly how big our audience is and where that's coming from, right? Through more metrics from, ads, ad placement, or stats from YouTube. And we can start to see, okay, we're not targeting this market enough, or, the market that we're trying to aim for is over here, but we're hitting here, so there's some overlap. It's all a numbers game at that point, because you need to make that money back, and if you don't sell enough, that you're fucked. You've spent 200 million. You have investors and shareholders that are looking down at you, waiting for their piece of the pie, and the piece of the pie that they're waiting for is larger than 200 million. It's probably over 300 million, right? Because they need to make money from it. They need to make money from it, not just return on investment, but they need to have higher than 100% return on investment. That's what matters. That's the problem. A game that makes 400 million and needs to end up probably making 500, 600, or 700 million to please the shareholders. And then guess what? They're going to give you more money for the next game, expecting you to make even more than you did before. It spirals out of control. Studios shut down. People are mad. Publishers don't seem to understand that they probably should have just given 700 million to 100 million. They could have just given 7 million to a whole bunch of different 100 different companies. Public companies, yeah, it's that's why we're not public. That's why we will never be a public company.
That's true. Graphics are a really good first impression selling point.
Yep.
Like, people will look at a game that looks really good. Like, for example, that Dawnwalker game yesterday looked crazy good, right? And they'll be like, holy shit, this looks amazing. And I do think, like, if you have a low quality game like that with bad graphics, that's how Genshin did so well, even though it's shit. Well, it did. Yeah, it looked really, really good. And that's also like art direction and like graphical style too, more so than anything else specifically. Throne Liberty sucked me in with its graphics, but the gameplay and the core sucks. See, to me, it was the same way. Like, Throne and Liberty was a game that the graphics and the style of the game, well, the style was kind of mediocre, but the fidelity of the game was really good. It's just that the gameplay was dog shit.
But it's not even like that. That's the only important aspect. You can make a game that is high fidelity but has shit stylization. You can make a game that has really good stylization and shit fidelity, and both could be popular. I mean, Borderlands 1, oh, I mean, people, I don't know, people super like Borderlands 1. I'm kind of in the minority. I love Borderlands 1. But let's just say Borderlands 2, these are not 4K textures, but the game is stylized in a way that is very memorable and enjoyable with its cell shading. Hey, Culture. It'd be nice if a respected publisher or two announced and advertised a game without any cinematics to set a precedent. I think that um, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, they've done a really good job at that. They've just released, oh yeah, here's 1 hour of unedited gameplay. Oh, there's a bug there. Oh, we'll fix that. We have till February to fix that. I mean, and that's exactly how it should be done. Those people over at Warhorse love games. They love gaming. You can feel it. They have a passion. They're doing it the right way. Where I look at that and I'm like, yep, this is definitely a step up in terms of gameplay from Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. I'm in. That's all they need to do is just release unedited gameplay, but so many publishers and developers are afraid of that because they're afraid of showing bugs. And I kind of get it, but at the same time, I think that players will treat bugs the same way that you treat bugs. When players feel that you're afraid to show your game because of bugs and issues or unfinished, section of the level, they feel as though, oh, we're going to be like adjacently scared because you're scared. So now whenever we see unfinished things and bugs in a game, we are also scared. But if you just are like, okay, we are 3 months away from release, this build is from a month ago, it's pretty stable, but if you see any bugs, yeah, we're just going to fix it. And Larian Studios was like that with Baldur's Gate 3, although BG3 was certainly not the most stable at launch, let's be honest. Just say, oh yeah, oh okay, that's a bug that's happening. We have some QA guys watching the video. They'll get that logged and we'll get that fixed up after the stream of this. So the more normal you treat it, because bugs, crashes, they're pretty normal in game development, right? I think players will start to see, oh, the developers aren't worried, therefore I won't be worried either. I don't know if there's probably a word for that, right? Where it's kind of that you adopt the emotions of the people near you. You kind of like mimic it. So like babies, if they see you crying, they might start crying too. Because it's like, oh, something's wrong for adult. I gotta be wrong. Something's wrong. I gotta cry too. Need to watch that. Don't have KCD2 on my list, but I was disappointed with KCD1. Yeah, it's not for everybody, right?
Graphics open the door. I've told some designers under me, sometimes it's like dating. Your head may be turned by the prettiness,
Yeah.
but you stay because of the personality and the chemistry.
Well-
So it's like that with games. Make a pretty game, more people will at least get their eyeballs on your game. Then they're staying because of the mechanics. And then later on, they're deny ever even looking at your game because it was pretty.
I mean, and what you can always do is you can always release like a higher fidelity texture pack if that's what people want. So yeah, it's more important to nail the style because players will be more forgiving of lack of fidelity in some cases, right? Where, okay, maybe you don't have Dragon Age Veilguard's hair physics. Fine, it doesn't need it. It's cool technology, but if you can't recreate it for a reasonable amount of price, I would rather spend $100 million if let's say I have a budget, right, of $100 million, which is crazy, by the way. I would rather spend 50 million of that on good writers and designers and programmers to make the game play well and stable than spend 50 million making sure that the ray tracing and everything has 8K textures for the 2% of the population that can even play it at that fidelity. It's just not, it wouldn't be a priority because I can always improve those things over time, or we can release patches that improve that. It's much harder to release patches that improve upon core gameplay aspects or have some sort of impact on the core loop and how players are enjoying that. Wolfie Odinson, thank you for the follow. Okay, quick, give this man $100 million, man. It's hard enough getting $1 million as an indie developer. And somehow Concord gets given hundreds of millions. Something's wrong.
One of the things I want to point out is
It's me.
Many of you argue against things that would make a game that even tries to provide more things for more players. And I've talked about how design by committee is bad, which I agree with.
Yep, it is.
And usually that leads to making a game that's so bland
Too many cooks in the
and
kitchen.
He's
vanilla
talking about Dragon Age Veilguard, by the way. It's Starfield.
that no one can really have a
Hey,
an
I still think Starfield is better than Dragon Age. You don't want to spend 50 million on DEI. Seems to be important to some companies. What's important to companies is a lot less important to what's important to gamers, right? It doesn't matter if your car that you're releasing has all these extra features if the people that are buying your cars don't want those features. You know, it's the market sets the expectations, right? So if players are screaming that they want higher fidelity games, more ray tracing, better lighting, bigger booba, then that's what's going to get made. It's as simple as that.
argument against it, but nobody really feels like playing it.
That's
what I
right.
mean by that is many of you literally have argued that games should have fewer game options. I'm not even talking
That's
about game
true.
difficulty, just fewer game
True.
options. I have a video on game options. I'll link it below. Again, read those comments.
Yep.
Many of you are going, yeah, I hate when games have a lot of options. I don't know what to set. The designer should have decided that. Why are they making me do that?
The answer is very obvious though. It's called analysis paralysis. So it's not that the play again. This all comes down to it when players are vague. They say I don't like this. Well, you have to ask them. Well, why? Why is it? What do you want to be doing right now that this is preventing you from doing? And the reality comes down to if there are too many options, the players don't know what to pick, especially if it's just like disables enemy crit bonus. And that's all it says. Well, it's like you jump into a game, it's like, well, when are the enemies getting a crit bonus? I don't understand the point of this option. It's disabled, so do I want it? Can I change it later? Now I have analysis paralysis because you've given me an option that has almost made me think, well, what am I about to play? What am I about to jump into? So I think that giving options is good, but yes, players might not like too many options because they have that analysis paralysis where now it's more than just choose your difficulty or turn on infinite money or unlimited ammo, which are really obvious to understand. Now you're asking them to choose a whole bunch of things that they may not understand, and you've told them that they can't change it later. I don't like RDR2, but the reasons come down to gameplay. And if this wasn't a Twitch comment, I would go into detail. Yeah, I mean, we can always go into that some other time. Disable gameplay. Don't expect the player to design a game for you. I mean, but to the same extent, I don't think that providing options means that a designer can't design the game. So, when I was designing like the train game I worked on, I provide a default experience. I balance the game for you. But I also provide additional options, so maybe you can turn on like the harder difficulty, the more casual, and again, I've designed presets, but I also allow the player to go in and customize all of those options themselves. For people who may want a more casual experience with the progression, but want a harder time, I don't know, driving the train, right? So those things don't mean that I can't design the game for the player, it just means here's the base experience, here's a more casual experience and a more hardcore experience. But if there's anything that's part of that you want to change because you want it differently, like infinite money, go for it. Infinite money is not enabled on any of the base difficulty levels, but you can enable it on any of the difficulty levels if that's how you want to play the game. But again, yeah, some people may not like that, and it is what it is.
That just means they didn't have a strong vision. Not ignoring for the fact that many of those options are there to let more people play the game. I'm colorblind. That's a disability. There are games I literally cannot play because they have puzzles or information that I'm supposed to pick up on that's color-based, but there are no color blindness options.
That's
the worst ones of these are ones that don't say up front that they do that.
Yeah.
And then later I'm playing the game and I
point.
realize I'm playing it wrong, or I've encountered puzzles that I literally cannot solve.
Yeah.
And there's no option to do so.
I mean, here's the cool thing is Unreal Engine, and Unity probably has a plugin for this too, but I know Unreal Engine Base does have colorblind options, like they're just blueprint nodes, which is really cool because I didn't know those existed until recently. And for other engines, those can be pretty difficult to implement, or they can just take time. Time is money. So, to some extent, certain accessibility options are really cool, and it's great that games provide them, but they do come with that overhead and cost that the more accessibility options you provide, the more the budget's going to bloat. So, there is that middle ground, right? What I didn't like about the yellow paint discussion that people have had prior is that they called yellow paint an accessibility option. Oh, so your accessibility is being stupid. I see. It's yellow paint is not an accessibility option. It is a crutch for bad level design, and I will stand by that.
Super frustrating.
It takes time.
That's accessibility, not difficulty. I think that one of the worst things to happen to the accessibility discussion in video games is for people to view disabled gamers as like retards. Or like if you're a disabled person, maybe your arm doesn't fucking work.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you're an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean you don't want to be challenged.
And I'll tell you what, a lot of these people who play on like those controllers for, people with, certain disabilities or paralysis or whatever, would be so much better at you than playing the game if they had both of their hands working. The fact that they can play some of these games as well as they do with one hand, man, normal people are cooked if these people ever get the ability to use both their hands. We have no chance. Just don't have climbing. You don't need yellow paint or do what Genshin did and climb on everything. Well, I will say I'm not a fan of Genshin's normalization of we should just be able to climb everywhere. I mean, I get it, but at the same time too, it kind of trivializes certain aspects of level design. Reminds me of my hands don't work getting his Infernal Cape on OSRS. Yeah, it's a really good example. Well, I know a lot of people that bought their cape. Yeah, I won't ever do that. Having proper and robust accessibility is kind of hard to achieve. It really is. It costs money, right? And there's a lot of accessibility options that aren't within the base game, and then every accessibility option you add needs to go through QA, right? And you need to playtest that with people who have that disability, which costs money. So it's a really good thing to try to achieve, and I hope that we can enable more cheap plugins for like existing engines that allow for certain accessibility features to be enabled really easily, but it can't be something that is expected all the time. But colorblindness, I think, is one that is pretty easily solvable by most engines, especially Unreal, and I'm sure Unity as well. So most games, because most games are released on engines like that, should be able to solve those.
So figure out a way for that person to play the game with one fucking arm. So, and the issue I think happens a lot where you have video games that their idea of accessibility is making the game so piss easy that it doesn't matter what you do wrong. You can flip and flop and flail around for 5 minutes, but if you get 3 hits on the boss, it's dead.
No,
well, that doesn't really
that is an accessibility feature that's called journalist mode.
Sound like a very compelling and rewarding experience, does it?
So let me sum up, because I've been ranting for a while.
Yeah.
I get
fake
that
accessibility,
you,
yeah.
the individual, want what you, the individual, want. But you have to realize that you, the individual, are not very good at giving developers feedback, and that you, the individual, are not everybody the game's being made for. Many of you aren't even in the majority, and I hear you. I don't think I'm in the majority. I like a lot of niche games.
He's right.
I've made a lot of niche games.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I'm saying here is game development is hard on its own, technically. But this lack of consensus among game players about what they want takes...
I think that what they should do is that they should make Dark Souls 1 again all the time. Like, basically everything that Dark Souls 1 did, just do that again.
I mean, I think Tim's right where it's... Do devs know what gamers want? No. And I think it is closely related to do gamers know what they want? But that goes even further to do humans know what they want? And I think that that's all related. Where if people knew what they wanted, we wouldn't make mistakes. We wouldn't get ourselves into bad situations. Thanks, huge cookie. I do, man. And so it just kind of continues on from that point where no, nobody knows what they want. We think we do. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we make bad decisions. We buy games that we thought we would like, but we don't like, and it's probably mostly related to to marketing. But here's my hot take that'll get all the Aspen watchers upset. I wasn't a big fan of Path of Exile 2. It just wasn't for me, right? But I'm not going to leave a bad review because I recognize that while the game wasn't for me, the game is very highly popular, and it probably just wasn't my thing in the first place, and I just probably should have been more careful buying it. So, but it might end up being that. So, I was just basing this off of my initial playtest. I'm gonna wait till it gets a bit further in development, jump back in, and see how I enjoy it there. You know what I want? Okay.
It's really simple. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like really, I mean, people try to overcomplicate. I don't think it's that complicated at all.
That difficulty to a
Call
whole
of Duty, yeah.
new level. It's that much harder to make a game that you want to be popular, that you want to have a lot of sales, because most of you don't know what you want.
Yeah.
Those of you that do know what you want are very vague at expressing it. And many of you don't realize that what you want isn't what a lot of other people want. This is why, for most of my career, I just made what I wanted, what I liked. I hoped other people would like it, but it was me and the team just trying to make something we'd like that would make each other laugh, make each other have fun. And we were like, gee, I hope people like this. We weren't sure. We didn't care. And when marketing would ask us questions like, what's the demographic for your game? We didn't know. We didn't have an answer.
Gamers.
And most of us, we didn't even care. We're like, I don't know. Why don't you go home and play the game and tell me what you think, who would like it?
Makes sense.
I mean, yes, I'll say yes. Generally speaking, designers should trust their instincts, but that those instincts should be honed and constantly refined based on keeping up to date with current market trends and what players like and don't like, right? So at least you have a good feeling that you're making a game that the target audience will find. Things were different when making Fallout, okay? The market was different. It was entirely different. You had only a few games releasing within a certain quarter, that were kind of the big names. Now you have hundreds of games releasing every week, and the competition is way more fierce. So there is a necessity to provide a game that fits within a certain demographic or within a certain market, and to appeal to that market. In order to appeal to that market, you need to know what that market wants. And that is dependent on, like we've said, competing releases. If I'm making a CRPG and, Baldur's Gate 3 released, I need to now update my game or my, the expectations that players are going to have based on that release. So it's constantly changing, constantly evolving. I mean, I agree with Tim that this might stem from gamers not knowing what they want, but also it might miss the fact that developers do have a responsibility to, with their expertise, provide the players with what they think they would want. I don't know, when you're a chef in a kitchen, your customers order, they generally know probably that they're going to like that food, but that's no guarantee that they will. They could have been misunderstanding what the food was, they could have thought they would like the food, or they could have liked it prepared in a different way than what you're providing. And so you need to either prepare for that or communicate it better to prevent those misunderstandings, because bad reviews don't just happen from games that failed to impress players, but also may have been mismarketed to players. Players were promised X, they got Y, they purchased it on the premise that the game would have X, No Man's Sky with multiplayer on release, and now they feel like they were scammed. They were falsely advertised, the game.
Sense.
Many of you like my earlier games. Maybe it's because I did make them in a vacuum like that, and I wasn't thinking what people thought.
I think that
However, I
it's
can
definitely
tell you,
true.
my later
Yeah,
That's
like
part of
other
it.
like newer games, it does seem like a lot of times they're designed for a target audience. And I think that it's good to design for a target audience, but I feel like a lot of the best games are the ones that devs make for themselves. Like I think Baldur's Gate 3 is a really good
Yes.
example of that. So yeah, it's definitely true.
Well,
The vision.
because you can't, if you're just a trend chaser and you're copying what other developers have done, there's no innovation being done on the design level there. You're just creating something that's already been created and you're playing it safe. And players do feel that. Players will feel the difference between an experiment that failed and a lack of any experimentation at all. You can feel that 100%. And I think the gamers by and large will appreciate a game that experimented in some ways and failed than a game that did absolutely no innovation whatsoever.
Vision, yeah, it's like people need to have like their own internal vision.
Your game sold more copies. So what's the right path? I don't know. But I can tell you this. Do game developers know what game players want? No, we don't.
They don't.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Yeah, I'll tell you that. I could have told you that automatically. Like, I that was a fact. Like, a lot of players, the reason why they have trouble being able to figure out what people want, it's actually super simple, right? And like you're 1,000% right. Yeah, it's like you have to target like. I think it's for AAA games. I think the main reason is actually super simple. It's because they try to design it for too many groups of people, and you can't end up making all of those groups of people happy. You can make some of them happy some of the time, but you can't make all of them happy all of the time.
Yeah, but it's, think of Dragon Age Veilguard, right? Where people are wanting that darker, deeper strategy RPG game, similar to Dragon Age Origins. The problem is that the number of people who would play a game like that is smaller than the number of people who want a Dragon Age game that doesn't play like that, unfortunately. So by trying to make a game that doesn't appeal to what Dragon Age was originally intended to be, they've cut out their originating hardcore audience of Dragon Age fans. Now they're targeting to a new demographic that probably didn't play Dragon Age Origins or 2 because it wasn't their type of game. So they've kind of shot themselves in the foot by, again, making a game that doesn't properly appeal to the hardcore players that definitely would buy it and know the lore and are going to be your biggest knights in shining armor for the game. And by making the action RPG game that they made, they weren't appealing to the new audience that probably only played Inquisition, if that. And while Inquisition, I think, did a lot of things way better than Dragon Age Veilguard, especially with some of the characters and writing, it wasn't Dragon Age Origins or 2. I mean, that whole franchise is just a mess. Dragon Age. It's one of those games where I know so many people that love Mass Effect, and if I were like, you would love similarities with Dragon Age Origins. However, here's a couple asterisks for playing Dragon Age 2. Here's a whole bunch more for playing Inquisition, and here is the entire world population of asterisks for playing Dragon Age Veilguard, only to end up with feeling disappointing that you can't even probably use a swear word. You don't even get to see any nudity in Veilguard unless you're playing if you're playing the female character. So it's like, it's just so watered down and tame and safe because God forbid we do anything out of the ordinary. I don't know, I'm so tired of that kind of AAA publisher logic.
And what ends up happening is that you have games made like Suicide Squad, like Dragon Age Veilguard, like Starfield. And I mean, the woke stuff is like kind of irrelevant, really.
It really
like
is
you take
irrelevant
out
to
all
that
the
point.
woke stuff out of Dragon Age and the game's still kind of bland, right?
It doesn't
Same
really
thing with
improve.
Suicide Squad. So like Concord, right? Even. And so like these things are maybe mining canaries, but they're really not they're not the real problem. And so I think the main issue is that games that are designed for everybody end up appealing to nobody. And that's why when you see small development studios that just make games that they think will be really fun and that they think people will like or that they like, that's whenever you see things really go well, I would say, more than anything. One of the main problems is games are being made mainly for adults instead of children and teens. For example, Nintendo targets children and teens and it has the least unhappy fans. The only thing that no fans complain about is lack of releases. Perhaps I'm blinded by nostalgia. I think that Nintendo definitely has more of a target audience, and they have more of like consistent, like a continuous, consistent strategy. And I think that that's caused them to have a lot of success. Definitely.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the issue is that games are being targeted to adults. I mean, the average age of gamers keeps going up, right? It's not going down. And I would argue that probably a good portion of gamers at a certain age are stuck in Fortnite and hero shooters than being interested in a game like Dragon Age Veilguard. I don't have the demographics in front of me, but I would definitely bet that the average age of people interested in Dragon Age Veilguard was older than those interested in any new hero shooter or Fortnite. I think the issue stems more with what they think this demographic wants, especially if you consider that if the demographics of the people who would want to buy a new Dragon Age game is older, then why would you not appeal and try to encourage players to play the original game? I mean, maybe I'm just saying remaster Dragon Age Origins or something, which I think we all want, but I think it's unrelated. Or if there is a relation, it isn't as strong as simply they spend so much money developing this game that they need to make that money back, and they've watered down the game so it doesn't feel like it's mature in any way. That game was rated mature. Dragon Age Veilguard is rated mature, and yet it feels, like I said, less mature than Finding Nemo, which I think was rated PG. It might even be rated G, but I think it's rated PG. Where's the rating for this? Where does it say it? Finding Nemo rating. It was rated G. Bro, Finding Nemo was rated G and has more blood and insults and mature themes than Dragon Age Veilguard, rated M for mature. We've clearly lost the plot at the AAA level of game development. Clearly. It's not even a question. My god, I thought that was rated PG. Jesus Christ. What have we done?
So games are for kids and teens? Well, some of them are, some of them aren't, right? I mean, you have a game for Grand Theft Auto, you're having your kids play that. Maybe that's not the best decision, right?
And you know what? I'll say, I'll let Esmond get back to it. I think that's one of the reasons why I played Stalker 2 and it felt so refreshing. And I'm not saying that game didn't have any problems, but that game was good. That game was good and it was fun, especially if you're a Stalker fan. That felt great. But what I appreciated the most was that during its very quite long story, its branching narrative and all its characters, it just felt like it was mature. Like it was speaking its own language in terms of these characters exist in this world. This world's lore exists. We're not trying to make fun of it. We're trying to take it seriously. And when you make decisions that affect it or affect other characters in the zone, that matters. It was a better RPG game than Dragon Age Veilguard. It had a better branching story than Dragon Age Veilguard, and it just felt mature. Shill alert. I mean, I'll shill. I know. I'm a fanboy of Stalker. I love its universe. Stalker 2 is good.
Or something else. Vampire Stars is an example of a good game made by a developer just to have fun and ended up great. Yeah, I think so too. Children deserve really good content too. Yeah, I think so also. And so what ends up happening?
I don't like the belief that children can't enjoy mature games. The same way this belief that children can't enjoy mature, films and TV. It's absolutely not true. It's provably not true. Children can enjoy mature themes and tackle those in a way that I think adults sometimes forget. Harry Potter tackled some pretty dark themes and ideas at a very young age for a lot of people. I grew up with Harry Potter. I fucking love Harry Potter. It did it perfectly. And now we have Dragon Age Veilguard feeling like it can't even match that complexity of themes. I don't think it has anything to do with adults or children. This has always been the case where adults misunderstand what children can handle. I think it's more of an issue with the budgets and the people who are making the call being out of touch with gamers because they are not gamers. Support developers who are themselves gamers. When you look at Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, you look at Warhorse Studios. I kickstarted Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. I remember those initial videos they showed of CryEngine and walking around Czechia. You could just tell that they loved medieval architecture. They loved fantasy and the medieval peasant life, and all they wanted to do was make a game that felt like it was an immersive sim reliving that experience. That's it. That's what they wanted. They drip that. They think that. They live it. They sleep it. And then they ended up making one of the best immersive sims, medieval immersive sims ever made, and they're looking at making a second one.
Happening is that I feel like a lot of games end up being developed and they end up, I'll link you guys the video. I think this was a good video. And he's right that a lot of players want different things. And I think that developers fail when they try to just go with the thing that the most people want.
Yep,
rather than going with the thing that fits the vision of the game in the best way and the most comprehensive way. And I think that's a big mistake of what happens, right? It definitely is.
I'll give you an interesting story related to this. And of course, make sure to give a like and subscribe to the original video. Let me see if I can find it here. Usually puts a link to it, but let me make sure we do that as well. I'll give you an example where I know a CEO of a studio who doesn't really play games. He got into it because actually he was into technology first. He was into like making software for other companies that was unrelated to games at all. He pivoted to games because I think he saw that there was more money in it, and he could find more people to hire to work on those games. And so he pivoted to games. So he wasn't a gamer. He didn't really have any interest in games, but he saw the money in it, and he already had a studio and people who knew the technology. And a lot of good games are built off of really unique technology that the studio capitalizes on. And exploit people. Well, unrelated. You're not wrong, but unrelated. When he was working on thinking of what the studio should work on next after one of the games already released, he went to ChatGPT. If you can smell the problem, yeah, it doesn't get better from there. So he went to ChatGPT and he asked it to perform some market analysis on what was this recent? It was actually even worse. It was when ChatGPT was just coming out, and he asked ChatGPT to do market analysis for what game they should be making, knowing that it was trained on like 2-year-old data. He had game designers that he could have talked to, and even when he went to his game designers, he told them that they weren't correct on their market analysis because ChatGPT told them something different. This is the problem, is you have these individuals who use old data, try to trend chase, and then shoot down perfectly valid, innovative, creative ideas that would engage the team on a creative level so much more deeply than chasing the next trend, stating that it's too risky, it's not going to earn us enough money, we need to go find the new Vampire Survivors or the new insert survival crafting game here. Hey Krill, how you doing, man? This is the issue. Pretty much every business person who has no love for games, it's exactly that. And so you've shut down, and I know also this studio did a game jam and shot down all of the ideas that the development team had made. There were, I believe, 4 games that studio jammed internally, and the majority of them were a lot more interesting and probably had more market viability than the previous game that they had developed. And they were all shot down because they weren't viral enough. They weren't chasing the trends enough. Those are the kinds of people who are running the show now. And that's one of the reasons why I started my own company. It's because it's just like, we want to be game developers that are also gamers, and we're making games for people who love games. That's it. That's our motto. games made by gamers, essentially. Alright guys, here's the link to Tim's video. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much for watching that. Make sure to give Tim a subscription. He makes a lot of great videos, and he puts these in really bite-sized lengths of time for people who may not be, super knowledgeable about games and game dev. So no matter who you are or where you are, I think you can get some pretty great content from Tim. And if you're interested, we have a whole bunch of our reactions to Tim Cain on our on our YouTube. So where's my Tim Cain reactions? We have 60 videos on this playlist about a whole bunch of different topics going back, many months. So if you're interested in watching those, I highly recommend taking a look at our playlist here. And thank you for watching that. So for watching on YouTube, thank you so much. And thank you, Asmon, for watching this video as well. It's always good to get your opinion and your chat's opinion on this, because you do represent a pretty good section of the gaming market that I think should not be misinterpreted or silenced out simply because they, are not the most subtle with the things that they believe. I appreciate that. All right, guys, for watching on YouTube, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Bye, guys. Bye, YouTube.